Between blinks, the shop smells like old brass and orange cleaner. If I keep the back door propped a thumb's width, the alley drafts in a thread of damp cardboard and hose water. The fluorescent over the workbench has a weak spot that clicks and steadies, as if it's practicing a decision. When I unlock at 9, I hang the towel on the hook by the sink and put my mug on its ring of pale on the counter. The mug is thin porcelain, chipped on the lip. I found it in the cupboard when I took the lease. Someone before me liked sunflowers. The glaze has crazed. When it gets hot, it smells faintly like toast. My name is Jonah, and I repair time for a living. That is what I tell the few people who still bother to drop in. I polish crystals, coax stuck second hands through their stutters, replace cracked coils in cheap quartz wall clocks with the same patience I keep for tiny balance springs from the 70s. I write numbers in pencil on little tags and tape them to the backs of pendulums and plastic blister packs. The cash register prints receipts that curl like little tongues, each stamped with the time down to the second. I don't believe anyone reads that line. The barcode scanner chirps even when there's nothing under it. A cheerful sound left over from days when the shop sold more than it fixed. Sometimes the scanner's ghost chirp answers the fridge hum from the staff room, and the two of them sound like a conversation I'm not meant to interrupt. There's a council notice taped to the door about water restrictions. There's another in the window about rolling outages, a schedule of suburbs and hours printed in wet-looking purple ink that blurs if you lean too close. Our block, Railway Parade to Barbary, gets the morning cut on Wednesdays, the evening on Fridays. The notice uses words like advisory and at-risk households and encourages us to prepare for temporary inconvenience. The town has not been itself since the mill closed. The mill's siren used to mark the afternoon and the night shift more reliably than any clock. You could feel it in your sternum, a soft hand. Now the only siren I hear is the late ambulance working the highway, and a handful of old alarms in this room that I never plug in because nobody needs to be startled in a place where the walls already tick. The first anomaly is small enough I could have missed it. A man from the pharmacy buys a battery, and when the register spits the receipt, it stamps a time that hasn't happened yet. He tucks the slip into his wallet without looking and leaves with the polite distance people keep when they don't want to know me. It isn't just a minute ahead, it's 6 minutes and 21 seconds. I glance at the clock over the door, one of the few I trust, a barrel-faced thing from a school in Bircherton, and it says what my phone says. The register insists on the future. I tear the receipt off and lay it flat with a finger. There's a smear near the line with my ABN. Nothing to think about, just a little blur where the ink ran, but the blur is shaped like a flattened hand. When I rub it, it gets worse. I open the blind behind the counter one slat and watch the traffic lights at the corner. It's a cross of 4 roads, one given up to trucks, the others to the cars of people who are either leaving or don't want to get stuck. The lights hold red for too long, then let cross traffic creep into the intersection like toddlers unsure of permission. In that mush of caution, someone honks, a light, apologetic honk, and the honk slides into the fridge hum back here, the way water finds its level. I take my mug into the staff room and run the tap. The water coughs brown and clears. The towel on the hook is still damp from yesterday. I hold it under my nose. It smells faintly of iron, like pennies pressed in a palm. My upstairs flat is on the 3rd floor, a staircase worn into a shallow cup in the middle of each step. There's a spot near the landing where the handrail is warm every afternoon at 2, as if someone else has been there a moment before me. The stairwell is painted a color that hides dirt and dust badly. I used to hate the way my feet sounded on those steps, like a person arriving in his life too heavily, like someone who doesn't know how to place himself down. Lately, the sound has become steadying. At noon, I climb for lunch and listen for the little creaks. They're in the same places they were yesterday, a constellation of micro-noises so familiar they almost count as names. When the blackout hits at 1, it takes the fridge first. The humming stops mid-breath. The fluorescent over the sink tries to argue, then goes over to whatever side always wins. It's been hotter each day. When I nap on the couch between repairs, my skin sticks to the vinyl, and it comes away dotted with a pattern that looks like the back of a watch strap. Yesterday I woke with the shape of 2 hands on my forearm, not a bruise, not a sunburn, more like a shadow printed into the idea of me. I told myself it was the plastic, that the little cracks in the couch made a silly imprint and my body took it too seriously. I had a sandwich in the dark and counted the beats of my heart until the lights returned. The first thing that came alive was the fluorescent hopping twice like a startled bird, and then the fridge hummed slow and full like a person remembering a tune. The kettle clicked its little click because it can't stand to be left out. I washed my mug, dabbed it dry with the towel, and thought about a watch that has sat on the bench too long. Her name is Elsie. She left me the watch when she left the town. That isn't exactly true. She left it on the edge of the sink with the towel and the scrubbing brush, as if she was unsure whether it needed washing or winding. It's one of the little ones, a tonneau with jewel marks that brag more than they deliver. The strap has my name worn into it, where my skin pressed the leather over the course of a year when I thought wearing a watch might help me understand the hours better. That was before the mill went silent. That was when the siren still marked the days, like a kind word. I wind it once a week because it feels like a way of keeping something alive that doesn't need me. It gains 5 minutes over 5 days, always has. I used to forgive it. Now I find myself checking to see if it forgives me back. Customers arrive in pairs now, husband and wife, mother and boy. They hover, faces at the glass, and then drop in with that odd energy of people who don't know if they're meant to speak. An older woman brings me a kitchen timer shaped like a tomato. It's one of those retro ones with a chrome dial and a bell that rings like nothing in a kitchen ever does. She puts it on the counter and says it won't stop ringing. I can hear it while she speaks, a light, insistent tremble as if it wants to be taken seriously. I twist the dial back and forth and it quits. I set it to 5 minutes. It begins its steady spin down like a door being unlocked. I write her name on a tag and tell her she can pick it up tomorrow, and she says, "Tomorrow won't suit me." And then, almost to herself, "I don't know what will." The register prints a slip for the new ticket. It stamps a time that is now. The slip I made for the pharmacist's battery is still in the trash. When I fish it out, the numbers have faded, as if an impatient hand has breathed on them, as if, in being looked at the wrong way, the future loses interest and goes cloudy. I put both slips side by side. One is sharp, the other looks like someone had a go at it with a damp thumb. My mouth tastes metallic. I drink from my mug and taste porcelain and overboiled leaves and the ghost of toast, and under that, something I cannot name. It would be easy to say blood, but it isn't. It's a new taste, not entirely unpleasant. I swill, and the tea becomes itself again. When I roll the taste in my mouth with my tongue, the back of my throat clicks like a switch. The council adds a notice the next day. I read it on my phone before I even turn the sign at the door. There's a recall on certain mains-powered digital clocks, a vague advisory influenced by a government authority that says spurious oscillation has interfered with emergency communications in a way that is unlikely to affect individual households, but of concern in a cumulative sense. They recommend plugging such devices out until the manufacturer can test them. I think of the wall-mounted red display I fixed for the physio on Elm Street, the clock that once held faithfully at 59 and then backed down. He loved that clock, said it kept the rehab room honest. I think of all the cheap alarm clocks I'm asked to toss because the buttons go gummy. I think of the way a room of such numbers must look from the road at night, the little red dots and slashes, the uniform brightness of obedience. On Wednesday, the blackout comes early. The schedule said 1, but the lights falter at 9. The fluorescent on the bench limps long enough to make a show of it. The fridge is more decisive. The barcode scanner lets one last chirp slip, indignant, and the register hardens its receipt tape at an odd angle and stays that way like a tongue-frozen mid-syllable. The traffic light at the corner becomes a blinking amber circle. I go to the door and prop it open, because the shop is friendlier with that rectangle of daylight, and because a man from 2 doors down said yesterday that it smelled close in here. He said it with a kindness he couldn't hide. I tried to repay it by arranging the clocks in the window so they looked less like an argument. The heat sinks into the floorboards and rises from them in low, wet breaths. I wrap the towel around my hand and lift a pendulum from a case, the brass disc softer than it should be. There is a drip somewhere in the back where the hose attaches to the tap with a stubborn coupling. The drip sounds like it is trying to count something it never learned the words for. The radio I keep on the shelf above the unemployed toaster refuses to find anything but static and a soft, persistent hiss that could be someone speaking 2 rooms away. In that idea of speech, I hear the word advisory, and in the sound of my own heart, I hear the second hand. When the power returns at 11, the clocks wake with different tempers. The old ones stretch and return to their jobs with a fussy pride. The little quartz wall clocks stutter at first and then go on as if nothing happened. The cheap digital ones blink 12, 12, 12 like an accusation. The register clears its throat. The fridge hum returns, lower than before, as if its idea of itself has shifted. I hold my mug to the hum and feel it rattle above the porcelain ring as though it wants to take part. I fold the towel and put it on the hook, and it sags more than a dry towel should. On the counter, the woman's tomato timer runs out its ring again without warning, a soft silver rain. I pick it up and tighten the dial and lay it down, and it dissipates like a sigh that has decided to move on. At the end of the day, I carry a box of broken things up the stairwell and set it on the landing to catch my breath, and the landing feels warmer than my palm. I don't remember it ever being warm. The plaster on the stairwell wall has bubbled in a small, neat circle near the second flight, as if trapped air has tried to choose another way, as if the stairwell itself is breathing through a pocket of paint. There's a cheap plastic clock up on the shelf near the wiring box where the hallway turns. It used to be set by the landlord to the time of his worry about tenants. It has always read 10 to 10 because he likes the way it looks, brave and hopeful, as if the clock is smiling. Today it reads something else, a time I recognize as the minute I left the shop for lunch last week. I stare at it, and when I lift a hand to shake it by the edge, it obediently springs back to 10 to 10, polite like a shopkeeper caught staring. I should sleep, but I end up at the window of the flat, counting the red nets of the traffic lights, the blink after the blackout that feels like a held breath. A man on a bike rides through the amber without stopping, and his wheels whisper on the white paint as if the line is a different texture of road. Somewhere down the block, someone drags a bin and lets it go, and the clatter becomes a train in my head with a rhythm to it that is not a train's rhythm, just the rhythm I need, and so I put it to work. I stand there too long with my forehead against the glass. In the reflection, my face looks several years older and a week younger and the same, depending on how the light inside boils under the fluorescent's hesitation. When I return to the shop in the morning, a stack of receipts sits under the register's lid like a deck of cards. I didn't run that many yesterday. The times jump in little jerks across the day, a handful pinned exactly to the hour, then a cluster at 01, 02, 03, then 2 in the future, nothing in order. I fan them. The paper is damp at the edges. The ink smells sweet, as if the numbers have been picked underripe and forced to redden on the counter. I put them aside for the bin and then decide to keep them a little longer because the idea of throwing them away feels like throwing away something with a face. I don't mean I see faces on the paper. I mean I feel watched. I mean the room has turned its head a degree. It's Thursday. when the town puts up new barricades at the mouth of railway parade. They are square and light and a friendly orange that suggests a situation under control. The sign on the side says detour in heavy black, but there's nowhere to go unless you count the long way to the highway, and the long way doesn't like us anymore. It makes the street outside quieter. I have the door propped, and the sound of the corner shrinks to the slips of amber and the buzz of someone's air conditioner arguing with a small army of bees. I answer a phone call from a man who used to leave his watch on my counter once a month like a confession. He wants to know why the tone in town has changed. He says tone like there's a note everyone hears. I say, there's an advisory, and he huffs because he has never trusted councils. Then he apologizes before I can be offended and hangs up like he didn't mean to phone at all. I could write the story of my life with lines of notices. The one about off-peak train times changing and why that matters to me, because the off-peak becomes the only peak you live in when your job is in the places other people have left. The one about the mill siren you could set your heart to. The one about the temporary inconveniences practicing their permanence. Water, light, deliveries. The old woman's tomato timer ringing all by itself when nobody asked it to. The way you adjust. You put one more jug in the fridge before a blackout, you fold the towel a second time, and you don't ask it to be dry until it is ready. You place your mug in its ring and knock it once with a knuckle, because sometimes it answers. You keep the stairs swept so that when you walk up them, the sound your shoes make is the sound of your own life and not something somebody else left behind. Friday night, the power cut is due at 7. People on the street speaking to one another say things like, "We'll eat early," and "I'll charge my phone now," and "It wasn't this bad last summer," and "They say the new substation is months away," and "If they just said." The council posts a fresh schedule with little blinking dots, and we pretend to believe those dots are ours. I put a blue torch on the counter. I take the tomato timer out of the drawer because I don't have the heart to ring it in a room this quiet. Letting it ring seems like lighting a fire in a library. The kettle clicks when I set it on the ceramic ring. For a moment, I see my hands as if they belong to another person. Hands that have learned to anchor tiny things. Hands that know the difference between dust and what should not be there. There are fine lines on the back of my left hand that look like minute marks on a dial. They fade when I rub them. At 6:30, I lock the door and go into the staff room and make noodles with the joy of someone who has outfoxed a schedule. I eat leaning on the bench, the mug warm near my elbow, the towel draped across my shoulder because it feels friendly there. The fluorescent in the staff room knits a small hiss into the air that the fridge hum stitches through, a tight, regular pattern. The blackout comes at 7 sharp, and the fridge gives a laughing exhale before going still. The fluorescent tries and gives up. The room takes a breath, deeper than I thought it could hold. I put the bowl in the sink and the water coughs brown and clears. I wash my mug because there is nothing else to do with my hands. I go to the doorway and look into the shop, and all of the clocks look back. The last faint light from the street makes a low lake in the doorway. The glass of the cabinets and the faces of the wall clocks hand it around. My eyes adjust and pick out luminous dots at the edges of dials, tiny green flecks. A small travel alarm sitting on a shelf pulses its own heartbeat like a vigilant animal. I stand and listen to the mechanical pieces of the room, the ones that don't ask the grid for permission. Many of the watches and clocks in here have fallen asleep forever. I keep them for the parts and for the idea that I am surrounded by time denied. The ones who are awake have their own opinions on the hour. The old-school clock over the door plods on with the pride of a mustard horse. The pearly-faced thing on the back wall with a rotating moon chases itself and runs out of uneven breath. When a second hand passes its mark, the sound it makes calls to a sound my body is making. I count. The numbers come in clean. I never had trouble counting before, but it feels different. The counting is moving my blood. The radio on the shelf above the toaster pops back to life without anyone telling it to. It finds a station I don't recognize and gives me a long, fine buzz threaded with a voice so faint and far that the words become shape, the shape of a message. You don't need meaning to follow shape. You need the promise of meaning. The shape says, keep to your schedule, and we thank you for your cooperation. And the shape says, tonight, we will extend the cut. And the shape says, an abundance of caution. And the shape says, restore. And the shape says, soon. It isn't the council. It isn't what a radio should do when a town has gone quiet. I go to the shelf and put my hand near the speaker, and the little charge of the old plastic climbs my fingers like a set of small claws. I don't pull away until the sharpness turns to warmth. I say, all right, because saying all right in an empty shop is the same as not saying anything. I take the torch and climb the stairs. I touch the handrail where it is always warm at 2. It is warm now at 7:10. At the landing, the bubbled paint blisters look swollen. I press one lightly with the pad of my thumb, and the skin of paint flexes like a balloon, then slowly settles back. On the third flight, I swap the torch to my other hand, and the beam crosses the plastic clock by the wiring box. It reads exactly the minute the blackout began. It holds that minute. It is a cheap clock with a single AA battery someone forgot to replace. It has no way of knowing the state of the grid or the family of possible meanings in a shop below. It holds the minute like a person who has decided that this is the minute that deserves to be loved the most. I sleep badly. When the power comes back, some appliance in a neighbor's flat kicks into a prodigious hum that climbs the stairwell and pretends our building is a throat. In my dreams, I am biting something soft and shiny and pulling a thread from it that keeps coming and coming. And the thread is light, and my mouth floods, and the taste is the taste of someone counting nearby with their eyes closed. When I wake, my jaw aches. My molars feel as if they have spent themselves on a job. There is a thin, bright cut on the inside of my cheek where I have chewed my own flesh in my sleep. There's no blood, only the clean ache and a ghost of that metallic toast taste that isn't toast. I rinse my mouth at the sink, and the tap coughs and clears. The towel presses its half-damp comfort to my face, and I am grateful for an object that has the decency to behave the same way twice. Saturday is slow. People who say they will come take their chances at the lake. The paper denies that the closure is a closure. It uses different words. There's a line about a recommendation to avoid unnecessary travel to the industrial fringe because the substation is being rebuilt and heavy vehicles need a clear run. The words industrial fringe make me laugh because it's a phrase that tries to look like lace wrapped around rebar. In the shop, the clocks and watches keep the time they believe. I try to give them back their faith by turning what can be turned and cleaning what can be cleaned. I take an automatic from the drawer and pop the back and run the tip of my tweezers along the edge of the case to flick out a thread of pocket lint that has decided it wants to be a part of things. I hold the watch to my ear, and the rotor moves under the plate like a swallow turning on its own weather. In the belly sound of it, I hear the big room ticking, the workbench light idling, the fridge learning its note. At mid-afternoon, I hear sirens, not from the highway. These are closer, tangled, coming toward town from the place where the mills are and the substation used to be. A thread of 2 or 3 vehicles rolling at a pace that suggests urgency, that has almost learned to live with itself. I stand in the doorway, and the sirens move along the next street and fade. The traffic lights hold amber with the patience of an animal. It's hot enough that the plastic barricades gleam. A boy on the far corner drinks from the bubbler and spits onto his shirt and tries to make it seem like he meant to. The air is still, and it smells like the river when the weeds go grey after a short, mean winter. The woman with the tomato timer collects it and leaves a jar of jam she made from fruit on a tree that no longer gets enough rain. She asks if my building gets any water at all. She heard some places up the street run dry. I tell her I get the cough, and the clear. She nods like that's good news. "Last night," she says, "everything in my kitchen vibrated for a moment. I thought of earthquakes. Then it was over." She uses the lid of the jar to tamp down a thread from the towel on the counter. I want to say I hear it too, that maybe some moments ask everything to tremble, and the smart objects obey, and the dumb ones pretend they thought of it first. Instead I say, "This one runs a bit," and she nods at the little timer like it is a pet that has learned one excellent trick and nothing else, and maybe that will be enough. I attend a meeting at the hall because the paper says counselors will take questions. I go because they say batteries will power the microphones, and because I like listening to equipment try hard. The hall smells like old varnish and ghosted sausage rolls. The PA checks itself with a foggy check that makes the ceiling fans tremble. The counselors sit behind a table that pretends to be a desk. They say words like review and manage and foresee. In the back, a man asks about communications. A woman asks why the industrial fringe remains restricted when the rebuild looks almost done. The counselor in the middle speaks in a procedural tone I trust more than I like. He says a sentinel system reported an oscillation event that the authority is evaluating. He says this in a way that makes the words seem harmless. When he leans toward the microphone, it pops as if a hand clapped my ear. On the way back, I pass the church. The bell has not rung since before the mill closed. The caretaker, Mr. Palin, stands looking up at the tower like a doctor reluctant to speak. He nods to me. He knows what I do, which is to say he knows what I used to do when there were more clocks in town. He says nothing. I say nothing. The sky is the color of a bruise at the end of its anger. A moth comes to the light over the church door and taps it with its paper head, patient, like a person knocking who would hate to disturb you. Sunday brings a bag of watches from a widow's sock drawer. She pushes the bag across the counter and says, "Whatever's worth selling, keep your fee." There are 3 branded quartz pieces that will probably live again if I scold them. There's one automatic that is so furred with the years, it feels like a throat with a cold. There's a wind-up with a cracked crystal that shows me the business of its hands with shameless clarity, and I laugh alone because the honesty of broken things is such a relief. I take the cracked one and loosen the case back and lift it a quarter turn and put the tweezers in and lift again, slow, so I don't gouge the soft metal. The smell that comes up is not unpleasant. Old oil, old skin, a sweet metal scent that noses out the stale orange of the cleaner I used for the bench. I place the back in the tray and lift the crystal, and for a moment the face is unguarded, and the hands seem longer than they were. The second hand has a hook on the counterweight end where it catches the eye. I touch it with the soft brush, and it clings, a prong catching the hair. I blow it free and put my breath into the works, and the breath comes back. It comes back. I feel it touch the inside of my lips, a light, precise tap. I close my mouth without meaning to. My teeth meet on nothing with the sense of having closed on something. After that, sleep becomes a practice with tests. A word I do not know keeps turning up, quiet, tidy, like a receipt I never asked for. It waits on the far edge of hearing, 9 rooms down. When the power leaves and returns, my apartment breathes in. When the fluorescents catch their rhythm, my lungs find it. If I count, numbers align themselves under my tongue. I taste the jam the woman left me. It is sour and edible, and it tastes like the idea of a clock attempting strawberry. I brush my teeth, and the tap water tastes like someone told it a story, and it listened. I set Elsie's watch to the correct time, which I cannot define anymore, except by the assertion that I live in it. I wind the watch and feel the mainspring coil, a polite tension, a body agreeing to hold what I ask it to hold. On Monday night, the last cut of the week comes at 6 and does not stop at 7 as the schedule had promised. The shop turns into a low, patient animal. The alley breathes the hose water smell into the gap at the back door. The towel on the hook is a hand. The mug on its ring is an eye. The traffic light at the corner is a beacon in a dry fog. I unlock the cabinet I never unlock, the one with the pieces that came with the lease, things that look like tools, and things that only look like pieces of something that might have been a tool. In the back of the drawer is a dial, thin brass, the numbers rubbed nearly away by fingers I will never know. I lift it between thumb and forefinger and hold it up to the doorway's light. It looks like a wafer. It looks like a joke a person might make to himself alone in a dark room. How many minutes can you fit on your tongue? I set the dial down. I say that first, so you might forgive me what happens 3 minutes later, when the radio's hissing becomes almost words, when the bench light gives one useless click like a child pretending at a switch, when my mouth fills with a saliva that tastes like places I had always needed to be on time for but never was. I put out my hand and close my fingers on the dial and bring it to my mouth. I set the bright side to my tongue the way a person might test a battery for life. The taste goes through me. The shape of the numbers, gone as they are, rises under the thinness and becomes bumps that speak to my tongue in a language that does not need words. I lightly bite the edge, the way you might test crispness. The brass gives the smallest curl and presses into my flesh in 2 places. It does not break skin. It does not need to. Somewhere in the room, a clock clears its throat to begin again. The bench trembles a millimeter each direction and steadies. My molars hum. I take the dial out of my mouth and set it, respectfully, in the work tray. The ache in my jaw makes me giggle with embarrassment at myself, the way you giggle after a private sin that harms nobody and nobody needs to know. The giggle shakes my shoulders. The room takes the giggle and makes it into a rhythm, and the rhythm finds the second hands. I can hear them pulling together like nieces at a holiday table who want to bump shoulders. The clock over the door with its steady plod looks at me with its hands at 10 to 10. The plastic clock upstairs is favorite trick, and then it drops to 9. The dials that allow a slow adjustment adjust themselves the slightest amount to face me. You could call it parallax. You could call it what the eye does when it wants meaning. The radio hiss develops an obligation to speak. Residents are advised, it says, then loses its courage in static, then comes back with temporary, the word that has decorated my life since I stopped thinking my life could be permanent. I fold the towel on the hook, and it makes a sound I have never noticed towels make, a clean little tear that is the sound a person makes when they invite you to watch a trick, and the trick does not work, and they are trying not to sound like they care whether you clap. I take Elsie's watch from my shirt pocket and wind it. Each turn of the crown pulls the mainspring's little voice in and winds it around a place in my chest that has been empty since she left. When I set the time, the hands tremble once at the minute they want and settle. I hold her watch to my ear. It goes tick-tick-tick with the smug righteousness of a thing that has been rebuilt so many times it is sure it has no more secrets. "All right," I tell it. "I hear you." I speak the words aloud. The shop listens. The floorboards answer with a tiny click near the register. The radio loses its station and finds a hum like a small engine 3 rooms over. A clock in the back room starts. I hadn't started it. My hand finds the mug and knocks it once at the ring, and the little porcelain rattles like someone replying in the next seat. After that there is no revelation, only accretion. A man named Ron brings me the civic clock from the Shire office because the hour hand slips at past. He leaves it in my trust and says, without words, that I am still someone who can be asked to do careful things. I open it on the bench, with the towel folded twice under my elbows. The smell from its case is cleaner than most, less skin, more dry paper. The hour wheel has lost an argument with a tooth. I replace the wheel and notice a line of oil that looks like a ruler drawn in a hurry. I clean it and lay the parts. When I breathe, the parts turn a degree as if to hear better. The minute hand seems longer. I fit it, and it fits without me. Ron collects the clock and nods. He carries it the way a person carries a baby that belongs to a friend, arms ready for a weight that changes its mind as you walk. The boy with the glowing dial returns with his shirt untucked and his eyes webbed with sleep. He says the watch shines after he's taken it off and set it on his bedside. He says he woke at 3 to see the numerals soft on the ceiling like a projection, and when he reached for the watch, it had stopped, and when he shook it, it went on. He holds his hand out, and I hold his wrist, and the pulse under my fingers sets my own teeth going, and I set the watch with my other hand to the pace of his blood, and it feels indecent, like drawing a curtain you have no right to draw. I give the watch back, and he says thanks in the small grateful way of someone who understands he has given away more than he meant. There is another meeting. This one happens inside phones and leaks onto the street through speakers that give counsel voices the thinness of ghosts. The counselor's procedural tone is worn at the edges. He says there is unlikely risk. He says we will continue to ask. He says we appreciate. He says this will be reviewed. He does not say when. The pizza place is back to selling only the pies that will cook in the time before a cut. Rafi, who runs it, offers me a slice he cannot sell because the cheese lost its nerve at the last blink. I take it and eat it over the sink, and the taste is not cheese. It is the clean, inorganic taste of a room about to be counted. The hallway blister thins. The plastic clock upstairs under its cover still sometimes chooses a time when I pass, and then, as if embarrassed, flips to 10 to 10. I begin to put coins in my mouth when I'm alone, only for a moment, only the edge of them against my tongue, to see if the taste is the taste that tells me what the room will do next. It is not the same. It is a dullness. The dial was different because the dial had learned. I leave the coins in a dish and do not use them for change. I have less appetite. I have more discipline. I sleep shorter and wake cleaner, like a person who has decided a quantity and lives in it. My hands leave marks on the towel like minute lines printed into cloth. The towel leaves a line on my face some mornings that I recognize as the shared mark of people who must place their faces somewhere they did not choose. When I stand by the door, I feel the amber blink slide into me, not as ownership, not as command, simply as a gap to be honored the way you honor the breath of someone you love by breathing with them. There are visitors who come as much to stand as to buy. They stand at the door and hold their phones like compasses that cannot find north. They ask if I still change batteries. They ask if I am open through the cut. They ask what time I have. I give them the time I trust, not the time the register wants to stamp, not the time the hallway thinks it remembers, not the time the boy's watch projects on the ceiling of a sleep that will not catch. I say 1:15 or 10 to, and the words go out of my mouth with the odd authority of someone who is not guessing and is also not invested in being right. One night the bell in the church rings once. It rings without prelude and without commitment, and it stops. Mr. Palin is on the steps again, and he looks at the tower as a father looks at a child who has spoken out of turn. He lifts his hand, and then he sets it down again. He sees me, and I nod. He nods back. He does not go inside. The sound hangs in the air the way a long word spoken in a small kitchen does, a little sweet, a little foolish, a little brave. I walk home different. My feet find the worn cups of the steps like a metronome practicing slowly. Another day brings a man with a cuckoo clock he says belonged to his father. The bird refuses to come out at the half hour and leaps, indignant, at the hour. We negotiate. I coax springs. I scrub pinions lighter than most insects. The bird's beak is scratched. I file the bird down and touch the wood, and the wood feels warm as breath. I scold myself for wanting to place my mouth near the place where the bird's beak goes and see if I can taste the resin of the varnish. I do not. I put the clock back together and it agrees to be a clock again. The man's eyes water. He says he hates the sound and he cannot live without the sound, and both of those things are true. The industrial fringe opens and then closes and then half opens, like an animal peeking from a burrow to check a sky. The green box on the pad wears a new sign that says commissioned and a smaller sign that says live. The paper runs a photo of two counsellors with their hands on their hips as if they can push a future into place. The caption misnames them and no one corrects it. The radio on the shelf above the toaster finds stations clean for 3 days. The council's voice says update and thanks and values, and soon the town learns to speak without verbs. After 6, during cut, between, we accept the noun of the amber. We place ourselves between its blinks. There is a day when I stand in front of the mirror in the tiny bathroom upstairs and notice my face has taken on a pause. Not in the eyes, around the mouth. The corners have softened, and the softened corners make the mouth look like it is always about to say now. I touch the hinge of my jaw and feel a tenderness I know, and then, under that, a logic I did not have before. I test my tongue against the scar I made in my cheek weeks ago and find the place is smooth, and the smoothness is smooth in the way a piece of glass is smooth when you have worn it with your own fingers. I take off the field watch and lay it on the shelf, and my wrist looks like a dial with the marks of a strap, and for a second I feel the edge of a panic I would have had a year ago when days were obedient. It passes. In the passing, there is permission. One afternoon, a school janitor, Mr. Lyle, brings the broken corridor clock from the high school. He sets it on the counter as if afraid it will run away. The case is cracked. The crystal is a crescent. The second hand has fallen and lodged under the minute. It is a small, solvable grief. I open it and lift and lay and coax, and it breathes again. Mr. Lyle tells me he keeps finding the lights on. He is certain he turns them off. He goes back to rooms, and the tubes are a little warm, as if someone was there just before him. He laughs in the way a person laughs when they have evidence of something that is not a crime. He says he is retiring. He says he's retiring because the school is not the school he started in. He pauses, and then he says, "The lights feel like a child learning, please." I know what he means. The boy with the glowing dial returns. He comes in, sets his hand on the counter and waits. I ask what time he wants. He shrugs. He is embarrassed. He says he wears the watch at night now to stop the ceiling. He says he wakes and it is 10 to 10. He says he wakes again and it is 3:13, and then it is 3:13 again. He says he is not scared, he is just sort of measured. He has learned a new way to stand. He stands as if there is a little pendulum behind his heart, and he does not want to jar it. I set the watch by my ear and listen. It sounds like a small injustice turned into a duty. I turn the crown a quarter turn. I tell him, this will lose a second every other minute. He looks at me like I have absolved him. When he leaves, I feel the room follow him for a step and then recall itself. The stairwell blister is flat now. The paint has left a pale dot like a minute mark without numbers. The handrail is not warm at 2 anymore. It is warm when my palm asks it to be warm. The plastic clock under its cover does not choose times now. It accepts its smile. My upstairs feels like a waiting room that got its job back. I sit by the window and watch the amber blink at the corner and the men moving barricades and the small business of a street that has worked out how to live without promises. A woman walks past with a folded towel slung over her shoulder, and I smell, through the open gap in the back door, the faint weight of damp cotton and something like pennies and something like lemons, and I understand I have never understood how much of a life is the management of towels. You asked for a breaking. We have had one. The second arrives without spectacle. It is not a betrayal. It is a joining. On a Wednesday afternoon, when the heat pushes shop air into my chest like a hand, and the radio has settled on a station that only says thank you in 57 different tones, a man I don't know comes in with a clock from the tower. Not the bell, a movement in the cabinet below, the civic face that children draw when a teacher says draw a clock. He is gentle with it. His hands make a circle on the wood where circles were already told to be. He asks if I can make it keep itself through the cut. He says, people stand in front of the tower at 8 now and take photos because 8 exists like a favor. I tell him I can try. He goes. I wait. I open the case with the towel folded twice under my elbows. The gearing is honest, pinions you can see, bushings that tell you they have suffered and will suffer a little longer. There is a stub of lash where there ought to be none. I adjust and listen. I adjust and hold my breath. I adjust and breathe. I say now very softly, and the room holds still. It holds still so much that I shade my eyes with my palm as if a bright light has found me. And in that stillness I feel, on the tip of my tongue, the memory of the brass dial's taste. I do not put anything in my mouth. My mouth does something anyway. It makes the shape of a second. The second drifts out. The movement accepts it. I wind the thing, light at first and then politely resistant. When I finish, my teeth ache with a small correctness. I put the case back together, and the sound it makes when it meets itself is the sound every room wants to make. Unnoticed, exact, deserved. After that, I eat differently. I eat as if the jaw has decided when. Bread has to be torn to a certain size. Fruit has to be cut beyond a shape that my mouth expects. Soup is too smooth. It behaves like a hallway with no doors. I drink hot water with a slice of lemon that yields its oil in the same second each day. The taste is not brass and not hose. It is the taste of a dial left in the sun and brought inside to be kind. I go to bed earlier. I wake when the radios decide to find a station. The window makes a sound on its latch that I had not heard before. The sound chooses its own time. The council prints smaller notices. The green box on the pad gets a fence higher than a man. The diamond mesh, neat and convinced. People stop taking photos at 8. A rumor says the bell has been tuned. When it rings at noon, it is the same bell, with an earnestness trimmed. It is easier to accept earnestness that knows how to be quiet. I walk with my hands behind my back past the church, because it feels like the right thing in a place that has learned to breathe around itself. One night, in the thick, warm hour that is no hour, the radio says 3 words that are the most I have ever asked from a radio. It says, "We are restored." Then it says nothing at all for a long time. The silence is not a lie. It is a task. The clocks in the shop keep their various opinions and begin to agree at the edges. The register prints a receipt with a time that is not the time I said and is also not wrong. I stand with the mug in both hands and roll it once and set it down, and it does not rattle. The towel is dry. The hose coupling is obedient. The fridge hum comes in a touch higher, as if my chest has lifted a rib. After restoration, the town behaves as if it has won something. The paper says well done and partnerships and resilience. People stand under the amber light without glancing up. The barricades sit on the curb like toys a child no longer wants. Rafi leaves his door open, and the smell of hot dough reaches my alley as a sentence that had a period taken away and feels better for it. The green box on the pad is just a green box. The industrial fringe smells like the industrial fringe. A boy on a bike does a foolish thing at the corner and lives. Pedestrians laugh with their shoulders, and yet the cheap clock upstairs still smiles 10 to 10 at the hallway and rocks sometimes as if something has exhaled behind it. The stairwell dot where the blister was stays blank, a white minute with no numbers. Mr. Lyle retires, and the school's corridor lights learn a new posture that from the street looks like full compliance. The boy with the glowing dial stops by to tell me he sleeps. He says the ceiling shows only ceiling. He says the watch is a watch. He says thank you in a tone that does not ask me to answer. The tomato timer woman brings me a loaf and says her little timer now only rings if she wants it to, and sometimes she wants it to for the comfort of the ring. She cries once and then she stops crying. She wipes her eye with the towel and says sorry to the towel. I take a Saturday and walk to the lake. I haven't taken a Saturday since Elsie left. The path smells like fried onions and sunscreen and weeds, an ordinary feast. I hear a boy insist to his mother that the man with the clocks lives at the lake. I sit on a bench and let the wind, if that is what it is, measure my face. I count without aiming at it, and the counting is a shape I know. A shape is not an order. Ducks move across the green water with the business-like intent of people who have learned their city. I picture the dial on my tongue, and the bench trembles the smallest degree and stops. I touch my jaw and feel only bone and a much smaller ache. The ache a muscle keeps when it has learned a good job. At the shop, I clean the glass and rehang a sign whose corners curled. I sort the drawer where the red-handled cheap screwdriver rolled months ago, and I do not find it, and I do not try. I place Elsie's watch on the bench and wind it. It gains what it has always gained. I write her a letter in my head that I will not post. In the letter, I do not ask her to come back. I do not tell her about the dial. I do not say the word eat. I say I am learning to breathe with a thing. I say the town is a chest. I say the clocks have opinions, and sometimes they agree, and it is not my job to make them. I say I have grown quiet without becoming small. I end the letter no longer, and I put it away without having written it. You asked for a quiet, unsettling resolution. The unsettling part is this. I can leave the shop. I do to take the bins and to walk to the lake and to stand under the church's patient tower. But the place where I live in me has moved. It sits in the strip of laminate on the counter where the mug leaves its circle and where the towel's edge sometimes rests. It sits in the small gap at the back door where hose air comes and goes. It sits in the amber blinks gap and in the moment before the fluorescent concedes to light. In the evenings, I count customers who do not come with the same courtesy. I count seconds for clocks I cannot fix, because what they require is not repair, but a witness to their refusal. The town stops posting notices that say advisory. It posts notices that say update, and then it posts fewer of those. The green box on the pad is something you forget to see. The bell rings at noon, and it sounds once again like a person tying a ribbon on the day and stepping back. The radio becomes ordinary. I turn it off. It turns itself on twice and then gives up. The register stamps times I agree with. The scanner chirps for no one and then remembers itself. The stairwell handrail is a handrail. The hallway clock is a smiling clock. The towel dries in half the time. The mug smells like toast and water and tea, and sometimes like the faint ghost of a brass memory. At night I sit by the back door and do not count unless I want to. I wind the field watch. I wind the tower clock when asked. I wind myself into the next day while understanding that the day is not mine to own. There are marks on my wrist that will outlast me. They are small and they look like patient measurements. They don't hurt. When I lay down on the staff room couch and close my eyes, the hum in the building comes to meet me. It does not ask me to eat or to swallow. It does not ask anything. It breathes out. I breathe in, it breathes in, I breathe out. Between those, the amber blinks. The hose gives up a measured drip. The fridge declares itself. The fluorescent trains its click. The barcode scanner, out of habit, clears its throat, and somewhere beyond the corner, a siren runs along the edge of town like an old animal who knows its path and no longer needs to prove anything to anybody.